Everybody, welcome to a new edition of Lost and Found Muscle Cars. I am, of course, your host, Wes Eisenshenck, founder of the Lost Muscle Cars Facebook page. But today, folks, we have a special guest from the world of NASCAR, the lead commentator on Fox, also the onstage personality of Barrett-Jackson. You can follow him on Twitter, and he's got his brand new show out on YouTube called Joe Riding. We have Mike Joy on Lost and Found Muscle Cars. Mike, how are you today?
Thank you, Wes. I'm great. I'm glad this episode isn't titled Lost and Found Podcast.
That's correct. Go ahead, Mike. Tell them what happened on round one.
We're going to try to recreate an episode that we recorded a week ago, except some of the recording didn't happen. It's more time in the shop, so it's okay.
We're going to put the genie back in the bottle and open it back up, and we're going to even do better than last time, Mike. I think we got a couple things we can discuss that we'll add more to this content on this channel. But let's first start out, Mike, with how did we get to know you? Talk to us a little bit about a Camaro that was very true and due to you. And you just had to find out what happened to it.
Yeah, the first one was a 71 Camaro that I had bought in March of 1973. So the car was a year and a half old. It was the first car that I had bought with money I had earned. I was 23 years old at the time and announcing short track stock car races most of the time when I wasn't going to college, trying to finish up after the Army Reserve had intervened in my college career, but that's okay. So I saw this car and I was a huge fan, and still am, of the Trans Am series. And I wanted a car that raced in the Trans Am, win on Sunday, sell on Monday, and I wanted a second generation Z28. This was a 71. So unlike the 70, it had the high back seats. It had a 9-to-1 compression engine instead of the 10.5-to-1 in the 70, which turned out to be a very good thing, because when the 1973 gas crisis hit, Charlie Reynolds, who ran the gas station where I worked part-time, showed me how we could retard the timing so that we could run on whatever crappy regular gas we could get during the gas crisis. And people with higher compression cars had to park them because there was no way to get the detonation or get the ping out of them. So the 9-to-1 turned out to be a good thing. I gave up 25 top end horsepower that I guess I never missed. But it was a wonderful car, a great corner carver. We had it set up to do autocrosses, road rallies, long distance trips, just everything. And I do remember with Charlie's tuning, we went from about 11 to 14 miles per gallon, which I thought was just fantastic at the time. Hey, what do we know at the time, right? I thought 14 was really good. So kept that car all throughout that time that I lived in Connecticut and worked in Connecticut and Mass. And when I moved to Florida in the fall of 1978 to go to work at Daytona, had a townhouse, didn't even have a garage. So had no place. We had no place for a third car in Florida. So Stafford Speedway was kind enough to store it for me in the winter. We found a place to hide it in the summer, but that kind of ran its course. And so I sold it to a friend who also worked part-time at the racetrack, who was going to restore it. It was starting to show a little rust in the bottom of the doors and the bottom of the fenders from New England road salt. And he worked on it for a while, and then it got sold and we lost track of it. And that's where you entered the story.
Yeah, so Mike had reached out to our Lost Muscle Cars page, and one of the key components to being able to find cars sometimes is still having old paperwork. And Mike retained old paperwork, which had the serial number. We got our eyes in the skies. We got our men behind the curtain who can help us with these things at times. And lo and behold, we were able to track down Mike's old 71 Camaro. Believe it or not, after 30 some plus years, Mike was able to finally see the car again, but as cars are wont to do, it took on a new personality, didn't it?
When I saw the pictures, I didn't believe it was my car. Talked to the owner. He verified the VIN. I asked him about some features that we had personalized on the car, and they were long gone, because he took my corner carving Z28 and turned it into a big block drag car, and he loves it. He is very proud of his Camaro.
Yeah.
But I don't think much of it as my Camaro. And finally, he came up with a picture where it still had the Mulsanne blue sheet metal fenders and nose with the white stripes.
Yeah.
The back half was in primer and ready to be redone. And I went, all right, yeah, that's my car. Only it wasn't. Only it was. So I guess the best part of that, Wes, is that I could stop looking for it.
That's right.
Tried to help me find the drivetrain that came out of it: the LT1, the M21 Muncie, the 373 Posi rear. All of that was gone, but the fellow who had pulled it out, the owner before him, had sold it off, didn't know or care where it was. So trail went cold after that.
It does. Maybe it'll get picked up again, but folks, the car is now more John Force than it is Mark Donahue. It is a quarter-mile terror. So at some point, we're hoping to see videos of that car go down the track, and maybe there will be an inkling of remembrance there for Mike and in the performance aspect of it. But that wasn't the end of your Camaro tenure of ownership, was it?
No, I went from. I took that car out of service as a daily driver when I started traveling to do public address at faraway racetracks, and bought a Volkswagen Scirocco for that purpose, which was a very good car for that. Drove that for 2 years, bought a brand new Mercury Capri 2, the hatchback version, in the John Player special. They had black and they had white with the gold pinstripes and gold interior grille and all that. Had one of those. That was cool. Mm-hmm. And then with the move to Florida, when the second gas crisis came, it was hard to justify even a 16 to 18 mile per gallon Camaro. So traded that either on the second Scirocco, which was a 1.6 liter injected 5-speed, or on the first RX-7 that I had, which was a 79, pretty much when they first came out. So somewhere right around 1980, that second Camaro, which was a 78, also in a color looked very much like Mulsanne blue cloth interior. Again, M21 4-speed, Posi traction rear. Don't know where that car is, but they weren't so highly prized by collectors even then. A lot of those later Gen 2 Camaros didn't survive. They got a lot of miles put on them, and eventually they'd get parted out or turned into short track stock cars or whatever.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So folks, here, for all of you paying attention today and wanting to help, Mike has got the serial number on this car, right? So a lot of times what we find on lost and found muscle cars is a car isn't necessarily gone if it's unregistered. What that means is a car could have been parked, it's in storage, it's been unlicensed for decades upon end. States are different with how they actually store their information. Every state actually has different laws regarding how long they keep registration of a vehicle. So the great news about Mike's car is that, being a Southern born, let's say sold newish kind of car, and Mike, you traveled a lot down south. There weren't races that you were coming up to in the winter and getting salt on this vehicle. So tell us a little bit about your travels with this car. Were you taking it across the country to Sears Point and Riverside? Okay.
We'd fly to those races. Those were flyaway races.
Okay.
Probably from Daytona, where I was living most of the time that I had this car, probably the furthest that I'd drive to a race would be Charlotte or Rockingham, or maybe Richmond. I do remember a trip or two back to Connecticut with it, but of course, not you wouldn't take that car in the wintertime if you had a choice. And at that time we did. So there's one feature about that car that will be different from most any other 78 4-speed Z28. The automatic car's got a 342 rear, the Z28s and the Trans Ams. The 4-speed cars got a 373.
Yeah.
Well, I was doing a lot of highway driving back then, so I wanted lower RPMs and better gas mileage. A friend of mine, Ed Yarrington's son, who ran Stafford Speedway, he had a Trans Am. He wanted more acceleration. So one night we put the back ends of both cars up on jack stands and we just swapped rears across, swapped the speedometer gear in the transmission, and everything was right again. So it's one of probably very few, because you couldn't order the 342 optionally with the 4-speed. So one of very few 4-speed 78s with a 342 rear.
No, that's cool. Now, and that Trans Am currently houses, if that car survived your old 373 gear set. So that's kind of interesting in itself. So folks, we got some photos of Mike here, and we're going to show them to you. And Mike, tell us about this photo of you at Daytona with your Camaro.
I had moved to Daytona a couple of months earlier, and the IMSA road race finale was coming up. And part of my job in PR for the Speedway was to generate and send out press releases, including for TV stations and magazines, color slides of, what was upcoming at the track. I said, well, now why don't we do a cool comparison, a street car versus a car that will be in the race, just to show how vastly different they are.
Yeah.
So I don't remember who volunteered their IMSA GTO class road race Camaro to park alongside my stock, mostly all stock 78. But you can see there's quite a difference, quite a contrast, even though the green car was based on a stock unit body. It went pretty wild from there within the framework of IMSA rules, which were quite liberal.
Yeah, as you can tell, aerodynamics was playing a larger and larger role in road racing as you get into the late 70s, early 80s, much as it had done in NASCAR starting in the late 60s. So it's a beautiful shot, Mike. It's got just I don't know who shot it. Hopefully it was your camera. It looks really good, and it's a great reference photo here for people who now you can marry it up with a look and a VIN number. If you got this car stashed away somewhere, we'd love to be able to reunite Mike with it, at least in person one time, show him his old car. What was your favorite lasting memory, Mike, in that 78 Camaro?
I think it was a long trip down the Blue Ridge Parkway from Connecticut to the last NASCAR modified race of the year at Martinsville. We drive down 84 and 81. And then at some point where the parkway started, hop on over to the Blue Ridge Parkway and try to make the same amount of time we would have been making on the highway. It was just, like I said, the car was, one thing from 1970 all the way to 81, which was the end of that styling cycle for the Gen 2 Z28. The suspension, the wheels, and though the tires went from belted tires to radials, that F41 suspension was the same all the way through.
Wow.
And I believe so was the steering box. So a 79 Camaro Z28 would handle just like a 70 or a 71. And it was a great suspension. And Chevrolet called that Z28 the 4-seat Corvette, and they weren't kidding.
Yeah.
Because an LT1 Corvette, an LT1 Camaro would run very, very similar times, both at the drag strip and and on the road courses.
Yeah, both kind of the last time that there was that long of a duration of a car even being manufactured on a single platform as well. For the most part, you get more current and rapid changeover in framework and bodywork now on these cars. So folks, we have one more thing to talk about with Mike Joy today. Mike has started a YouTube show with his son, Scott, and it is called Joyriding. And we are in love with this show. I've taken a look at a couple episodes already, Mike, and you guys are onto something. This is unique and different in the hobby. Tell us a little bit about what joyriding entails.
Scott grew up around cars and racing people, and developed a love of cars, and so did his sister, Caitlin. But Scott primarily, he's a racer. He has really good skills, and I think it's something he'd love to do full time if he could, but realizes that those opportunities are very few and far between. So we're having fun with collector cars. He's very involved with the Boyd collection out of Henderson, North Carolina. They bring a lot of cars to Barrett-Jackson, and it's part of a multi-generational collection of a couple of hundred cars. Sure. And the Boyds are all, good friends of ours. So Scott got pretty immersed at a young age into the whole car thing. And he raced Legends cars on ovals and road courses. He's raced spec BMWs, spec Miatas, and now vintage cars, including historic Trans Am. Yeah. So the idea of the video channel was to say, hey, he wanted to preserve some of what I know and what I can tell people in, say, a Barrett-Jackson telecast, or even work in an occasional reference to classic cars on a NASCAR telecast. But there's so much more there, and he wanted to capture some of that and try the YouTube thing. Well, once we got into it, what I realized was his taste and his perspective on cars is 50 years opposite mine. We were not arguing, we were discussing a car that I wanted to buy, and he went, well, Dad, it's fine except for the silver wheels. I go, what? He says, they need to be black. I go, Scott, they're silver because they're the wheels are part of the car's jewelry, part of its look, part of the whole thing. You need to see that and celebrate that. He goes, nope. He says, black wheels. And I realized, there's something here. And although he was at first reluctant to go on camera, he wanted to produce and shoot and be behind the camera. He's got a knack for it, and he's got a knack for storytelling. My favorite video out of the whole series so far is him talking about all of the revelations of driving a 1956 Chevy Bel Air for the first time.
Wow.
And he drove it. We bought the car. He found the car. He talked to the owner. He actually negotiated it, made the deal. And I said, look, I'm not sure this is going to be worth it. I'm going to go with you an hour and a half away to look at the car. And car was way better than he had described, or than the picture showed. So we got the cashier's check. They got the title, put it all together, drove back. And it's all right. How are we gonna get it home? And I go, hop in the seat. And I think his first fear was about the 3 on the tree shifting or the manual transmission. Well, how do you shift it? What if you goof? I go, Scott, it's the same as the 4-speed, or in his case, the 6-speed in your road car. It's just, instead of on the floor, it's not, the shift plate's not horizontal, it's vertical, and it's up here on the column. First, and I showed him how to hit second, drop down for third, how to downshift. He goes, oh, yeah. And so his first drive in a 50s car was an hour and a half, driving his Bel Air an hour and a half home. So about 3 weeks later, he recreated that drive, not the whole hour and a half, but about 10 minutes of it, and narrated the whole thing. No script, no edit button, no retakes.
Yeah.
The whole thing in one rip. And I go, all right, now, okay, we got something we can work with here. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Here we go for a ride through the beautiful Carolina countryside. Of course, this is a 3 on the tree. Actually, the first time I'd ever driven a 3 on the tree was when I drove this away from the place we bought it at. A little bit of a nerve-wracking experience.
And that is so cool. And I've seen a couple of episodes, Mike, and one of them, you guys had a Datsun Z on. And then you had one on an El Camino as well. And I think, even the El Camino is a foreign vehicle to people that are younger. And it's just kind of fun to get a fresh take on these cars, you know, stuff that some of us grew up with a little bit more. But hey, we're not going to keep these cars forever. We're going to have somebody that's going to be a caretaker down the road. And it starts with watching joyriding, getting used to learning how to shift a car that's a 3 on a tree. I mean, that is a foreign language to kids these days. But man, I'm excited to see more episodes. Mike, where can people follow you at?
Let's see. Twitter is @MikeJoy500. And I'm in a lot of car forums and Facebook pages, as I know you are. And on the car forums, on most all of them, I'm 200 mph, 200 mph, 200 miles per hour. And a lot of Facebook groups. Wes, I tell you, the best time in history to be a car enthusiast is right now. I go back to, well, let's say when I first had that 71 Z28 Camaro. If I wanted to learn something about it, I'd write somebody a letter and then wait and see if they actually responded, or try to get a phone number. You couldn't get a phone number of anybody in Detroit. You know, you couldn't reach anybody at Chevrolet, or you had to wait for the monthly car magazines to come out and see what they might be writing about that's similar to your own experience or what you want to do. But now, between all of these companies being on the internet, describing their products and offering them for sale, used parts, instead of plowing through all the junkyards like we used to do, now everything's for sale online, whether it's eBay or whether it's in a Facebook group or whether it's somewhere else. Everything's available and it's right out there. It's easy for you to get. And the collective wisdom of some of these sites to help keep you from making mistakes and help you work your way out of mistakes that you do make is unbelievable. In the El Camino video, I talk about a site, 60impala.com, 60impala.com. That's a whole website devoted to just one model of one car, 1 year.
Incredible.
And it's a fabulous site. They've got you know how the 60 Impala had a separate color stripe down the side with the word Impala and the cross flags. They've got a configurator there where you can put together all of the color and stripe and interior combinations and see it, you know, just the way it was. One of my favorites is mgexp.com, which is short for the MG Experience. And that is the most active group of people, you know, trying to keep these cars, all of which are now 40 or more years old, keep them on the road, keep them running, trade parts, find new old stock parts, find used parts, sell the crap that's in your garage. Sorry, I'm sorry. We buy junk and sell antiques, okay? And that's how everybody in the collector car field feels about it. But incredibly active site and just wealth of knowledge of people who have been there and done that. It makes it a great time to be an enthusiast because the knowledge base is right out there for everybody.
And what's amazing right now, Mike, and you get to see it at Barrett-Jackson as well, is just the swath of different builds that are coming across the block. I mean, we're seeing cars, you know, what I've seen right now that's really hot is the day 2 look. I just sold a pair of Arvin Speed Pack mufflers. These are a purplish pink muffler set that's going on a period build. So 1973 is coming back to 2023 right now. And with all the different niches, there's something for everybody in the hobby, whether it's patina, whether it's a high-end restoration, whether it's a very well-built Hodgkin suspension pickup. It's all out there right now. And man, it's like you just said, Mike, this is the time to be in the hobby. And go ahead.
We are seeing a little bit of a shift here. And you mentioned it. At Barrett-Jackson for several years now, patina rods and resto mods, cars that are restored to look original, but all modified underneath. That's what brings the huge money at Barrett-Jackson. It is the home of resto mods. And great. They built themselves a huge market from nowhere to all these 6-figure cars that are beautifully, beautifully done. However, Now, and again, I go back to the Boyds, all of their cars in their collection are original spec, and a lot of them are very low mile cars. They're probably going to send 20 cars to Scottsdale with each having under 10,000 miles. And these are 50s and 60s cars that just, for one reason or another, have been preserved and not driven. But my favorite part of the hobby are the cars with period modifications. What you just referred to as a day two mod, which is, okay, you buy your car, you bring it home, and you drive it and you polish it and you love on it. That's day one. All right, day two, what am I going to do to make it my car and not like everybody else's car? And those are all the day two mods. So when I was in high school, we had Motor Clinic in Avon, Connecticut. We had Deb's Speed Shop, Carl Debian's in East Hartford, right across from Pratt & Whitney Aircraft. So that's where all the engineers went to get their hot rod parts. And there was a speed shop in Enfield on Route 5. And to find used speed equipment, because we couldn't afford new stuff, you had to go to those places. And then there was Mo Pearl's Junkyard in Hartford. There was Pandolf's. There were all these different, what we now call auto recycling centers, where you could look and see what had come in and see what parts might be available. Now, all you need is one of these. All you need is a keyboard, and you can find all of that. And so I love it when cars come up on the block with period speed equipment or period modifications. I remember when I had my 60 Impala, which was my first car, which was this car right here. And when I had that in high school, you can almost see it on the left front there. Got a set of Baby Moons from J.C. Whitney. And I think including shipping, they were less than $10. And that was about what I could afford, barely. You know, had to have peanut butter and jelly for lunch a couple of days that week. And I had Baby Moons on body color 14-inch wheels. And man, I thought that car was cool. But now there's so much available, and it's available to everybody.
Yeah. You're seeing it now with the new Bronco, all the different aftermarket companies about producing stuff that can bolt on, easy stuff that you can take back off and when you sell the vehicle. And that's the same thing with day two. You're not hurting your car. You're putting something on with a clamp, or you're putting chrome on that can be unsnapped. This is not going to hurt the car, and the hobby is going to be better for it. And a lot of these big hoards, and I don't say that as a negative word, but a lot of these people who have been hoarding these parts for years and years, it's time to sell them, and the market is ripe for these period builds. So Mike, we've had just a gas with you today. I think we did a better job this time on our second round. So I'm gonna mark that up as a positive check mark. Guys, follow Mike on Twitter. He's a gas to listen to. He's got great perspective, and unlike some other people out there, he actually responds to you. And it's awesome to get an engaging personality like that out on social media. But take a look at Joyriding on YouTube. Go over there, subscribe, follow Mike and Scott as they present this awesome. When you said that earlier, I thought black, I thought Darth Vader. I'm like, that is exactly Scott's generation. Mike likes chrome, Scott likes black. Hey, that's kind of how we are in this hobby right now. But follow Mike there. Any last words for us, Mike, here on Lost and Found Muscle Cars?
It's a great time to be an enthusiast. I do feel kind of bad for my son in a way, because he will never know the dread of walking out to your car on a cold winter's morning and wondering, one, will it crank? Two, will it fire? Three, will it stay running? Because today's computer controlled cars are just so awesome. Like I said, my Camaro, I was thrilled to get 14 miles to the gallon. Mm-hmm. Today there are Camaros that'll get 30 on the highway. And it's just pretty awesome. These cars have, the Trans Am cars that we race in historic Trans Am, there are any number of brand new street cars that will go around Sonoma, where our cars are based, faster than these all-out race cars from 1970. So
Yeah.
best time to be an enthusiast is right now.
Guys, with that, we want to sign off with Mike Joy here on Lost and Found Muscle Cars. Stay tuned. We have more shows coming for you. Mike, it was a pleasure. Take care and stay warm in North Carolina.
Thanks, Wes. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.